Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. The African continent was shaken by a series of terrorist attacks this week. In Mali, a group of gunmen took over a luxury hotel, killing at least a dozen people and holding hundreds hostage. This developing story has yet to confirm who is responsible for the attacks. But in Nigeria, Boko Haram has claimed responsibility for suicide bombings in the cities of Yola and Kano and have claimed the lives of at least 49 people. The news comes after a report from the Institute of Economics and Peace that states that Boko Haram has killed more people in 2014 than ISIS, a terrorist organization that Boko Haram has pledged allegiance to. But what is fueling all of this terrorism in Africa, in particular Nigeria? Now joining us to answer this question from Côte d'Ivoire is our guest, Baba Aye. Baba is the national convener of United Action for Democracy, the largest rights-based coalition in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us, Baba.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
So, Baba, here at The Real News, we've really tried to point out how the Islamic State is fundamentally a product of U.S. policy in the Middle East. We were wondering if you could do the same regarding the genesis of Boko Haram. So let's begin by looking at this important contradiction between the fact that Nigeria is the biggest producer of oil in Africa and the fact that over 60% of its population lives in poverty. How can you link terrorism to poverty?
Definitely, terrorism in Nigeria, Boko Haram's rise of Salafi jihadism has a lot to do with poverty in Nigeria in general, and particularly in the northeastern part of the country where Boko Haram has as its bastion. While you said almost 70% of Nigerians live below the poverty line, in the northeast is actually closer to 90%. You have the largest number of pupils that should be in school age children that are out of school. So you also have a lot of illiteracy. It is by all standards the most backward part of a rich country with poor people. And you also have there's also a tradition of resistance right from the time of even before the colonial rule against the earlier Fulani jihad in the 19th century. So you have poverty been a fuel in a context where people have been used to fighting. So this is a very, very dangerous incendiary mix. And you also have a state that makes it difficult for legitimate expressions of angst and that tries to demonize people that point out. A good example, a few days back, 105 soldiers in the Nigerian army were missing. What did the army have to say when one the Premium Times, the online newspaper, Nigerian newspaper, mentioned it? They said that, oh, this is because they like the way of life of Boko Haram. You have had a lot of very, very untoward steps by the state in trying to hide the fact that what they are facing is much more than just what can be defeated militarily. It has socio-economic roots and it has snowballed beyond what can result in meeting a December deadline of smashing it, as the president stated a few months back.
Okay, let's pivot and discuss how people who are fighting poverty and the extraction of Africa's wealth into corporate hands, there's a whole history behind this. And this year, Nigerians are commemorating the 20th anniversary of the execution of environmental activist Ken Saro-Wiwa. For those who don't know, back in 2009, oil giant Shell paid $15.5 million as part of a settlement that accused the company of collaborating with the Nigerian army to kill Saro-Wiwa and 8 other activists. So for many around the world, this lawsuit helped bring to light the extent to which companies and the government work together to crush social justice movements. So Baba, I want to ask you, is this crushing of civil society opposition, is this to blame for the rise of ISIS as well? And if so, can you explain how?
Yeah, I would rather want to say attempt at crushing social movements because unfortunately, those who sow the wind, they reap the whirlwind. The case of Sariwa that you have brought up is very instructive for several reasons. The movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, which Ken Saro-Wiwa led, actually stood for civil disobedience, peaceful struggle. But with the killing of Ken Saro-Wiwa, the genie was let out of the bottle in the Niger Delta. And it was the context within which there was a turn to arms later. And you see that 20 years after the death of Saruwiwa, even his memory and attempts to commemorate this have been attacked by the Nigerian state. The Social Action and the Ogoni Solidarity Forum, which are both affiliates of the United Action for Democracy, incidentally, they did import what they call the commemorative bus, which was it was something from a competition when the 10th year anniversary of Saruwa's judicial murder was done in the UK. And it was to be used as part of the symbolism for marking the 20th year. But the customs refused to allow this to pass through. Incidentally, the current Director General, Comptroller General of the Customs, sat on the same tribunal that found Karuwa guilty in quotes, you get it. So you see, there's a trajectory of repression, but unfortunately, what it rather brings about is more violent response. You see this also with what you have in Boko Haram. Don't forget that it was the killing of the leader of the Boko Haram, Yusuf, in 2009 that led to this lethal stage of Boko Haram. And you find it also with regards to ISIS. You see, this is the fact that the system breeds a macabre dance for the entire society.
But hold on, Baba, because there are certain people that are going to say, this is not about poverty. This is not about repressing people. This is about ideology. This is about the rise of Islamic fundamentalism in the world. So what do you say to people who approach the issue that way?
I think they miss the point. They miss the point that you cannot separate ideology from the lives of people. You have always had religion, Islamic religion, for centuries now. But you have not always had them turning violent. It is not, if you ask me, it is not accidental that you had the turn in 1978, 79, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, the Iranian Revolution. In about the same time, you had the coming of a Ronald Reagan and a Margaret Thatcher, who were the twin flag bearers of neoliberalism. You see, when people cannot live, when material existence becomes so maddening for people, it provides ready ground. It provides the soil for recruitment into projects that claim a higher calling in heaven, borrow from Marx, it's about the side of people within the heart of people within a heartless world. So I think that thinking that ideology is something that has a life of its own is one of the most, pardon me if I use the phrase, the arrant nonsense, really. I'm sorry to say that, but that's just a simple fact about it.
All right, Baba, let's pause the conversation here. In part 2, we'll discuss the West's response to these attacks and how corruption is getting in the way of curbing Boko Haram. Baba Aye, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.